The farmhouse sat on the edge of the county line, surrounded by dead cornfields and forgotten barbed wire. It had once been the Gerwick family home, but they had vanished nearly 20 years ago. Rumors filled the silence after their disappearance. Some said the father went mad and killed them all. Others claimed the land was cursed. The house itself had sagged under years of rot. Shattered windows, a door hanging off its hinges, vines creeping across the wooden frame like veins on a corpse. No one in town ever went near it. Even the birds seemed to avoid flying above it. As the officers stepped out of their cruiser, the smell hit them first. It was sharp and sour, a mixture of rotting meat and mildew. Lorne instinctively covered his nose with his sleeve, while Kyra scanned the surroundings with her flashlight. The porch groaned under their weight as they stepped inside. The door opened without resistance, revealing a room coated in dust, cobwebs, and silence. The living room was untouched, furniture still in place, a broken clock frozen at 4:17. Framed family photos sat on the mantel, the glass cracked, faces faded but just visible enough to show a man, a woman, and 2 children smiling. None of them had ever been found. Lorne moved toward the kitchen, careful not to step on anything unstable. The air grew heavier with each step. Kyra followed, her flashlight now fixed on the floor. That's when she noticed something strange. Discoloration in the wood planks beneath the dining table. Dark brown stains, uneven and spreading. It wasn't spilled wine. It had soaked into the grain long ago. They cleared the table and began inspecting the floor more closely. That's when they found the trapdoor. It was subtle, hidden under a loose rug and secured with a rusted iron ring. Kyra hesitated. Lorne gave it a tug and it creaked open with a sound that seemed to echo too long. A wave of putrid air rose from the darkness, thick and moist. Neither of them wanted to go down, but both knew they had to. The flashlight cut through the black below, revealing a short wooden ladder descending into what looked like a basement. But it wasn't on the original property plans. Kyra climbed down first, boots landing on damp earth. The walls were made of stone and the ceiling hung low. The room was empty, except for the center. There, in a near-perfect circle, sat 7 hand-carved wooden dolls, no more than 6 inches tall. Each was positioned facing inward, like they were attending a silent ritual. In the middle of the circle lay a human skull, aged, cracked, and clean. No jawbone, just the top half, staring upward as if it had been waiting. No tools, no writing, just dolls and bone. Kyra's breath fogged in the cold air, even though it was summer outside. She called Lorne down, her voice trembling for the first time. He stood frozen as he looked at the scene. There was something unnatural about it. The dolls weren't just placed. They were arranged. Purposefully. Precisely. Lorne called it in. They would need backup, forensics, everything. But even as they waited for help to arrive, neither officer could shake the feeling that they weren't alone in the cellar. Something had been watching them long before they ever opened the trapdoor, and it was still there. By sunrise, the abandoned farmhouse was surrounded by yellow tape and flashing lights. The once-forgotten property had become the center of Mill Rock County's most disturbing investigation in decades. Forensics teams arrived with their gear, carefully stepping over cracked floorboards and ducking beneath beams that looked ready to collapse. News of the discovery hadn't reached the press yet, but every officer on the scene knew something bigger was unfolding, something darker than any of them had imagined. While crime scene photographers snapped images of the cellar and its contents, a specialized team began a full structural assessment of the house. That's when they noticed it. The outline of a false wall at the far end of the cellar, partially concealed behind loose stones and rotting insulation. With careful hands, the crew began dismantling the wall brick by brick. Behind it was a narrow corridor, barely wide enough for one person to pass through at a time. The corridor led to a hidden cellar room no one expected to find. It was built underground, with no windows and reinforced concrete walls. No lights, no ventilation, just a stale, heavy air that felt like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Along the walls were shelves made from old barnwood, warped and splintered with time. On them sat dozens of glass jars, each sealed tightly with rusted lids. Inside the jars were preserved organs, small ones, large ones, some identifiable, others not. Kidneys, hearts, lungs, all floating in murky yellow fluid. The labels were what made the room go silent. Each jar had a small, handwritten note taped to it. They weren't just numbers. They were names. One read, Ava Norwell, 2012. Another, Mira Denlow, 2016. And another, Tobias Wren, 2019. As the forensic team began cross-checking the names, the horror deepened. Every single one belonged to a missing person, cases that had gone cold in various counties over the last 15 years. Some were from as far as 3 states away. No one had ever connected the disappearances, until now, a rotting wooden desk stood in the corner of the room, half buried in dust. Inside the drawers were even more jars, but these contained something far stranger: scraps of clothing, pieces of hair tied with ribbon, tiny shoes, broken eyeglasses, personal effects, mementos, trophies. The items had been carefully preserved and catalogued. Detective Halpern stood back, letting it all sink in. This wasn't just a dumping ground. It was a museum of suffering, meticulously curated by someone, with patience, knowledge, and no regard for human life. Whoever had done this wasn't just a killer. They were something else entirely. The kind of person who lived in the shadows, unnoticed, always watching. Further inspection of the room revealed a hidden drawer in the floorboards. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, brittle with age. It wasn't written in any known language, just symbols and diagrams, some resembling medical illustrations, others like ancient runes. There were no clear sentences, only fragments. The body is the archive. Each piece holds a key. Preserve the vessel, never the soul. Kyra flipped through the pages slowly, her hands trembling. These weren't notes from a madman. They were rituals, instructions. The killer had a method, and it had been working. For years. No fingerprints, no photographs, no DNA. Just bones, dolls, organs, and silence. Back above ground, officers were already searching property records, trying to trace ownership. The farmhouse had technically been unclaimed for over 20 years. The last legal owner died under mysterious circumstances, and no one had taken responsibility since. It was as if the land had erased its own history, but someone had been there. Recently. The dust on the cellar steps was disturbed in only one direction. Down. Whoever had done this had been here, walking these floors, organizing these trophies. Maybe only days before, and they hadn't taken everything with them. The discovery of the hidden cellar had turned the investigation from horrifying to unthinkable. The small town of Mill Rock was now the center of an unfolding nightmare that stretched far beyond county lines. With the victims identified from multiple states, the FBI became involved, and a joint task force was created. Yet for all the manpower and forensic skill brought to the case, there remained no trace of who had created that underground chamber of death. No witnesses, no leads, just the initials carved into a single wooden doll. KM Detective Lorne Halpern couldn't shake the feeling that the dolls were the key. They were hand-carved, detailed, and made with a kind of precision that didn't match the brutality of the crimes. These weren't just trinkets. They were signatures. Someone had made them. Someone who took pride in their work. After scanning databases for known suspects with those initials, nothing useful turned up. That's when Deputy Kyra Mavik remembered something from years earlier, something most had forgotten. In her first year at the academy, she'd been sent on a welfare check at a house deep in the northern woods, far from any neighbors. The man who lived there was quiet, odd, but harmless, or so everyone believed. His name was Corin Meeks, a retired woodworker who had once crafted toys and ornaments for local fairs. After his wife died in a house fire, he vanished from public view. People assumed he moved away, maybe to live with relatives, but there were no relatives, and no records of him leaving town. Kyra dug through old files and found a property record, still active, still owned by Corin Meeks. The address hadn't changed. It was a cabin tucked between thick pines and rocky hills, untouched for at least a decade. With permission from the task force, Lorne and Kyra drove out to the location. The cabin appeared abandoned at first glance. The driveway was littered with leaves, and the roof sagged in the middle from years of snow and rain. But the mailbox still had fresh advertisements inside, no more than 2 days old. That meant someone had been there recently. Lorne stepped out of the vehicle first, weapon drawn, while Kyra circled around the back. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the cabin was clean. Not just tidy, unnaturally pristine. Dustless surfaces, books perfectly aligned on shelves, a firewood pile stacked with machine-like precision. It didn't match the exterior at all. This wasn't a forgotten ruin. It was lived in. What stood out most was the smell. Not rotting flesh or mildew, but varnish, sawdust, and pine. A workshop smell. As they moved through the living room, they found carving tools on the table, fresh wood shavings in the trash bin, a teacup with still wet residue on the counter. Someone had just been here. Every door was unlocked, except one. It was at the end of a short hallway, reinforced with a padlock bolted from the outside, as if to keep something in rather than out. The handle was warm to the touch. Lorne cut the lock with bolt cutters, and the door creaked open. Inside was a single windowless room. Dozens of wooden dolls lined the walls, sitting on miniature chairs arranged like a twisted classroom. Some were stained. Others had names etched into their backs. In the corner stood a large corkboard covered in photos, newspaper clippings of missing persons, maps with pins, scribbled notes. It was an archive of victims, a timeline. Each photo had a string leading to a symbol carved into the wall. In the center of the room sat a larger figure, not a doll, but a full wooden sculpture of a person seated with its head bowed. Around its neck hung a chain. Attached to the chain was a key. They hadn't found the killer, but they had found his second layer, and he had been planning something new, something soon. The key around the wooden statue's neck felt warm when Lorne removed it, as if it had been hanging from a living body. He didn't speak. Neither did Kyra. They both felt the same thing. Whoever was behind this hadn't vanished. He was still, very much active, and now they were standing in the center of his private sanctuary. Every inch of the room screamed control, precision. Nothing was random. Not the placement of the dolls, not the pins in the map, not the timestamps on the articles. Each detail meant something. They used the key on a small chest hidden beneath a false floorboard. Inside were 3 items: a handheld tape recorder, a sealed envelope with no name, and a large calendar marked with symbols instead of dates. One symbol in red ink was circled repeatedly. October 19th, 2024, just 6 days away. None of the other symbols matched any known codes. It wasn't astrological. It wasn't mathematical. It felt personal. Kyra turned on the recorder. Static hissed at first, then a voice, not shouting or panicked, but calm and matter-of-fact. A man describing procedures, steps, measurements. Subject 31, detained at 2:13 a.m., cold storage confirmed. Spiritual separation incomplete. Commencement scheduled, October 19th. That was all. No names, no places. But it confirmed something chilling. The killer wasn't just collecting bodies. He believed he was doing something beyond death. Some kind of ritual. A process. They boxed the evidence, cleared the room for forensics, and started reviewing nearby surveillance footage. A trail of blurry gas station recordings, grocery store cameras, and highway tolls placed a man matching Kyra. Meek's description near the cabin just 48 hours before the officers arrived. But the footage was never clear enough to confirm identity. Whoever he was, he had been moving carefully, without leaving digital footprints. No bank use, no phone records, no known vehicles. Like a ghost living in the cracks of society. The FBI suggested they check storage unit facilities within a 100-mile radius. That's when the case took its next turn. A facility on the edge of Mill Rock had recently received payment in cash for a year-long rental. The name on the form was Carlos Marchand, another set of initials KM. That couldn't be coincidence. The unit was opened under full supervision. Inside was a collection of VHS tapes, hundreds of them, arranged chronologically. Each tape was labeled with initials, some familiar from the missing persons list. Most of the tapes had dates and symbols that matched the strange calendar found in the cabin. No one had seen a working VHS player in years, but the FBI had one brought in from evidence storage. They began watching. The footage was raw and unsettling. Static gave way to darkness. Then a single light, swinging above a chair. In each tape, a different victim sat alone. No faces of the captor. No audio aside from the hum of the light and occasional scribbled notes heard off-screen. In many of the tapes, the victims looked drugged, confused, weak. Sometimes the recordings ended abruptly. Sometimes they faded to black. Each was like a scene from a nightmare, captured in silence. But one tape stood out. Labeled LH Final, it featured nighttime footage of Lorne's home. The camera filmed from across the street, then moved to the backyard, then inside the house. It ended with a close-up shot of Lorne sleeping, the camera clearly inside his bedroom. No signs of forced entry, no sound. Just one frame of his sleeping face, followed by the date, October 19th. It wasn't just a case anymore. Lorne was being hunted, chosen, and whatever was meant to happen on that date, he was at the center of it. Lorne hadn't slept since watching the tape. The image of himself lying unaware while someone filmed from just a few feet away, inside his own home, had lodged itself into his brain like a splinter. Every creak in the floor, every gust of wind outside his window now felt like a threat. He kept the lights on. He kept his weapon closer than ever. But still, he felt exposed, worse than afraid, marked. The date loomed like a curse. October 19th. The task force intensified their search for Carlos Marchand, or Kyra Meeks, if they were the same person. Every property ever owned by either name was being checked, every acquaintance interviewed, every scrap of evidence cross-examined. The name Carlos Marchand turned up in obscure archival files, once as a suspect in a disappearance in Missouri in 1997, another time on a passenger list leaving Estonia in 1983. But the trail always vanished. No fingerprints, no arrests, just a shadow passing through time. Meanwhile, forensic teams discovered something even more disturbing. One of the preserved organs in the hidden cellar belonged to a victim who had gone missing only 4 weeks prior. That meant the killer was still active, still hunting, and somehow still managing to avoid every trap they set. On the evening of October 18th, Kyra was the first to notice something strange at the evidence facility. A wooden doll, one that hadn't been logged in, was sitting at the top of the box, containing the VHS tapes. Its face was blank, unlike the others, but on its chest were 3 carved letters, LH. It hadn't been there before. No sign of forced entry, no one on camera. Just the doll, silently waiting, delivered without a trace. The message was clear. The countdown was over. That night, under full protection, Lorne was moved to a secure safe house 3 hours outside Mill Rock. Surveillance teams surrounded the location, No one could enter or exit without clearance. But at 2:13 a.m., the same time mentioned in the tape recording, something happened. The security feed cut out, only for 8 seconds. When it returned, everything appeared normal. But when Kyra checked Lorne's room, he was gone. The bed undisturbed. No sign of a struggle, no broken locks, no shattered windows. Just his watch left on the nightstand, ticking. And beside it, another wooden doll. This one had its eyes carved. Shut, mouth open in a silent scream. The safe house was torn apart, every inch examined. Sniffer dogs, drones, thermal scans. Nothing. It was as if he had vanished through the walls. The FBI issued an emergency alert across state lines. Checkpoints were established, borders flagged. But no movement was recorded. Lorne Halpern had disappeared into thin air. 3 days passed. Then 4. And then, on the 5th day, the final clue arrived. A package was delivered to the Mill Rock Sheriff's Department. Inside was an unmarked VHS tape. This time, the footage showed a familiar place. The same underground cellar from the farmhouse. The camera panned slowly across the jars, the symbols, the walls. But now, at the center of the room, sat Lorne. He wasn't restrained. He wasn't struggling. He was sitting cross-legged in silence, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees. Carved circles surrounded him on the ground. Candles burned low on all sides. The camera zoomed in until his face filled the screen. His lips moved slowly. Only one phrase could be read before the tape ended. The vessel is complete. The screen cut to black. The case was officially closed months later, labeled unresolved but inactive. No further victims appeared. No new dolls. No new tapes. But Kyra never believed it was over, because sometimes, late at night, she found wooden shavings outside her door. And once, only once, she thought she saw Lorne, watching her from across the street, not blinking, not moving, just waiting.